general.
Robert Pottroff, do you agree with the NTSB that if we had positive train control on that section of track, this probably wouldn't have happened?
Oh, absolutely. Positive train control has been on the NTSB's most wanted list for about 45 years. Positive train control would have stopped this accident. But there's so many other simple things, like just having 2 crew members in the cab of that locomotive that could have had the same result.
Yeah, and that, Robert, is obviously a budget item. You know, when I hear the discussion of Amtrak funding, it seems to me pretty much everything other than funding involving the ticketing system is a matter of safety. And even tonight, we're recognizing that in the ticketing system, we need a kind of clarity that really does tell us exactly who was on that train, so we know when to stop searching for survivors. So in the Amtrak funding, I think it's extremely difficult to find an area of the funding where you can clearly identify as having nothing to do with safety.
It's beyond logic to understand why freight railroads that haul just freight have an engineer and a conductor with 2 sets of eyes on the track and 2 sets of eyes on all the signals that are there to prevent these types of accidents. And for some reason, the passenger lines like Amtrak are allowed to have just an engineer. You're putting one person on an island and expecting perfect behavior out of that person, and that's your safety system. Without a backup that's mechanical based upon the technology of positive train control, or at least another set of eyes, you can predict these accidents. This is exactly the same thing that happened in Chatsworth, California back in 2006, September. One person stuck on an island, required to behave perfectly, and any mistake is fatal for everybody on that train.
And what was the mistake that the engineer made in that case?
In that case, he simply missed a signal because he was texting on his phone. We immediately kicked into action and got legislation that would outlaw texting on your phone. But we don't know what Mr. Bastian was doing in this case. What we do know is that he was there alone. He was running on a track that had an internal speed limit of 75 or 70 miles an hour. But the truth is, the Class 1 railroads, which would include Amtrak, have always taken the position that they don't have to follow their own internal speed limit. The track speed limits there are as high as 110 to 125 miles an hour before you get to that curve. So what that engineer was doing is part of his training. And the cab signals that had to go off when he went by the indicator had to have been turned off for this train to keep moving.
Explain that, Mr. Pottroff, explain that. What are the cab signals you're talking about?
Every train has cab signals, and they're not unlike the signal in your car when you forget to buckle your seatbelt. There'll be an alarm that goes off, a light that flashes, and a buzzer. The difference is on a train, if you don't address the problem that set off the alarm, and in this case, the alarm would be an overspeed alarm, if you don't address it within X amount of seconds, the train will stop itself. That's the way it's designed to work. Now, there's another thing that's designed into that same system that nobody's talked about. The FRA's not talked about, the NTSB's not talked about, and Amtrak's not talked about. They equip these trains with an override switch where you can turn off the cab signals. That had to be what happened in this case. That the engineer, and it's a common practice, when there's a problem that they don't want to be bothered by the cab signals, has another toggle switch available to them. They simply pull out the little seal that protects that toggle switch, turn it off, and you're not bothered by any of these signals that were there to warn you.
So this is as if your car, which has that alarm, the bell signal or something that tells you someone doesn't have a seatbelt fastened, it's as if in your car you had a switch where you could just turn that off.
Right. Plus the added component in your car, if you didn't buckle your seatbelt within a few seconds, it'd stop. And until you buckled your seatbelt, you couldn't move further. And
why, Robert, Mr. Pottroff, I have to ask you, I'm stunned that I'm learning this 24 hours after the fact of this crash. I've been watching all the coverage. I've been reading everything I can. I haven't heard the NTSB mention this. I've heard no investigator mention this, that there is actually an automatic shutoff system in the train for excessive speed. It is there. Not one word that I'm aware of has been said publicly by the investigators about that yet.
That's why I wanted so badly to come on here and talk about this. Up that track, a half a mile to a mile away, is a wayside signal, and it's just a little transmitter that tells that train if it's going too fast, the overspeed alarm goes off. If the alarm is not addressed, then the train shuts down on its own unless someone has hit the override. And those overrides will be used in times where you have to make up speed. They'll be used in times where equipment's malfunctioning.
Well, Mr. Pottroff, let me stop you right there for a second. This train had already been delayed, so this was a train with an incentive to make up speed.
Well, I didn't know that information until right now. That makes total sense. There should be an immediate investigation into the dispatch logs. All of those phone calls and radio transmissions have to be recorded. That will tell you whether or not people higher up in Amtrak knew that there was someone trying to make up speed.
When do you expect to hear that kind of information revealed?
Unfortunately, I've been a party to too many NTSB reports with the FRA. The relationship of the FRA and the Class 1 railroads is too close. You can't expect the fox and the guard dog to give a fair explanation as to what happened to all the chickens in the chicken coop. There's been volumes written about this relationship and the failure of these investigations to get to the root causes. And the root cause here is, if you take away the automated safety devices and you take away the backup human being, you're asking for these accidents, and they will continue to happen.
Robert Pottroff, thank you very much for that. I think we just learned more about what's possible in these trains than anything of our previous coverage in the last 24 hours. Thank you very much for that. Ezra Klein, thanks for joining us, too. We're going to take a break here. We'll be right back.